A Mercedes Sprinter recovery truck is following a figure through the darkness. That figure is a young woman. She is running. CCTV footage. The recovery truck moving slowly, closing in. A few seconds later, the vehicle forces her into a lamppost. The impact is powerful enough to crush ribs, tear her liver, and cause catastrophic internal bleeding. The driver does not flee. He lifts her into the vehicle, drives away from the scene, and calls 999. She was hit by another vehicle that drove off, he tells the emergency call handler. He even points at passing traffic, describing an imaginary hit-and-run driver. But CCTV cameras do not lie. The young woman was named Lily Whitehouse, 19 years old, the mother of a premature baby who was lying in a neonatal intensive care unit. The man behind the wheel, 22 years older than her, was the very person she had loved for the previous 2 years. This was not a road traffic accident. It was the final chapter of a story that had begun long before that fatal night. Before she became a name in a court file, Lily Whitehouse was a 19-year-old young woman living in Oldbury, West Midlands, one of the many small English towns where people recognize each other in the street. A few months before her death, her life entered a new chapter. She became a mother. Her baby arrived earlier than expected, and at the time of the offense, the infant was still being cared for in the neonatal intensive care unit at Russell's Hall Hospital in Dudley, fighting day by day to grow stronger. Those who knew Lily described her as a kind and caring young woman. Not the sort of distant image often seen in crime reports, but a young person trying to build a life of her own, becoming a mother, while also dealing with a relationship that, in the years that followed, those around her would describe as deeply troubled. On the night of 5 November 2025, Lily was doing nothing more than what a mother does every day. She went to the hospital to be with her baby. She did not know that it would be the last time she would leave that building alive. A few hours later, her name would appear in newspaper headlines. Not as a young mother fighting for her child, but as the victim of one of the most shocking cases in the West Midlands that year. But before reaching that tragic ending, it is important to understand who was sitting behind the wheel of that recovery truck that night, and what the true nature of their relationship. To fully understand what happened on the night of 5 November, we need to go back 2 years. The man behind the wheel of the recovery truck that night was named Mohammed Azim, 41 years old, living in Tipton, just a few miles from Oldbury. His occupation? A recovery driver. Someone whose job was to rescue vehicles that had broken down on the road. When Lily and Azim began their relationship in 2023, she was only just into adulthood. He was 22 years older than her, almost twice her age. A generational gap that was more than just a number. In many studies of domestic abuse, a significant age difference is often accompanied by an imbalance of power. One person possessing greater life experience, financial stability, and social standing, while the other is still finding their place in the world. According to people who knew them both, the relationship was far from stable. It was described as on and off. They separated, got back together, and then separated again. This is one of the classic characteristics of what psychologists refer to as the cycle of abuse. A period of growing tension, leading to an explosive incident, followed by a reconciliation phase, where everything temporarily returns to normal, just enough to make the victim believe that this time will be different, but it was not different. According to evidence later heard in court from multiple witnesses, the relationship between Lily and Azim was described as unstable, frequently marked by arguments, and, more importantly, showing signs of controlling behavior, along with both verbal and physical abuse. This was not a couple who occasionally argued like many others. This was a repeating pattern, one in which a person gradually loses their autonomy within the relationship itself. And like many other victims in intimate partner homicide cases, Lily stayed, not because she was weak, but because that is exactly how relationships like this operate. They do not present the victim with a clear exit, but slowly tighten their grip until leaving becomes more difficult than staying. 2 years after that relationship began, on a cold evening in November, that cycle would come to an end in the most devastating way imaginable. 5 November 2025. It was Mohammed Azim's 41st birthday. While many people spend their birthdays celebrating, that evening began much like any other evening in Lily's life. She went to Russell's Hall Hospital in Dudley to visit her baby. The infant was still being cared for in the neonatal intensive care unit, under the close supervision of doctors and nurses around the clock. It was one of the few peaceful moments in this story. A young mother sitting beside an incubator, watching her baby breathe. She did not know that it would be the last time she would ever do that. After leaving the hospital, Lily needed transport home. The person who came to collect her was Azim, driving the Mercedes Sprinter, the same recovery vehicle he used every day for work. Under normal circumstances, the journey should have been straightforward. From the hospital directly back to Lily's home on Amber Drive, Oldbury. A familiar route, a journey they had probably made dozens of times before. But that night, the vehicle did not turn towards Amber Drive. Instead, it headed in a different direction, towards Old Park Lane. This was the detail that prosecutors would later point to before the jury as the beginning of the tragedy. A small deviation from the route, a decision to turn left rather than right, but one that became the place where, according to the prosecution's case, the argument between the two escalated beyond repair. We do not know exactly what was said inside the cab of the recovery truck that night. No camera recorded the conversation inside the vehicle. But we do know what happened next, because this time, there were cameras recording, not inside the vehicle, but from locations along Old Park Lane. And what they captured would become the single most important piece of evidence in the entire case. Part 5. The Chase. The climax to 450 words. What happened next was captured by CCTV cameras along Old Park Lane, and was later shown to the jury at Wolverhampton Crown Court. The door of the recovery truck opened. Lily got out. Just minutes later, she appeared on the road again. But this time she was not walking, she was running. The CCTV footage captured the Mercedes Sprinter moving directly behind her. Rachel Brand KC, the prosecutor who personally presented the case before the court, made a statement that left the courtroom in silence. Azim had turned his recovery truck into a weapon. The CCTV footage showed what the prosecution described as a low-speed pursuit, not a sudden burst of acceleration, but a deliberate chase, second by second, before the fatal impact occurred. According to the prosecution's case, the sequence of events unfolded as follows. Lily tried to run away. Azim drove after her, and then the vehicle forced her into a roadside lamppost. The impact was so severe that her body was crushed between the vehicle and the fixed metal pole. The post-mortem examination later revealed the devastating extent of the injuries. A fractured arm, multiple broken ribs, serious chest injuries, a turned liver, and severe internal bleeding. The forensic pathologist reached a crucial conclusion. These injuries were entirely consistent with the victim being upright at the moment she was struck by the recovery truck and forced against a fixed object, not the position of someone struck by an unknown vehicle in a random road traffic collision. This was the forensic detail that would ultimately dismantle the entire story Azim was about to tell, just minutes later. Because while the silent footage recorded the truth, the man standing beside Lily's body was preparing to rewrite the events of that night entirely, according to a completely different version, a version that he would repeat again and again, to the paramedics, to the police, and later, to the jury itself. What happened next was captured by CCTV cameras along Old Park Lane, and was later shown to the jury at Wolverhampton Crown Court. The door of the recovery truck opened. Lily got out. Just minutes later, she appeared on the road again. But this time, she was not walking. She was running. The CCTV footage captured the Mercedes Sprinter moving directly behind her. Rachel Brand KC, The prosecutor who personally presented the case before the court made a statement that left the courtroom in silence. Azim had turned his recovery truck into a weapon. The CCTV footage showed what the prosecution described as a low-speed pursuit. Not a sudden burst of acceleration, but a deliberate chase, second by second, before the fatal impact occurred. According to the prosecution's case, the sequence of events unfolded as follows. Lily tried to run away, Azim drove after her, and then, the vehicle forced her into a roadside lamppost. The impact was so severe that her body was crushed between the vehicle and the fixed metal pole. The post-mortem examination later revealed the devastating extent of the injuries. A fractured arm, multiple broken ribs, serious chest injuries, a torn liver, and severe internal bleeding. The forensic pathologist reached a crucial conclusion. These injuries were entirely consistent with the victim being upright at the moment. She was struck by the recovery truck and forced against a fixed object, not the position of someone struck by an unknown vehicle in a random road traffic collision. This was the forensic detail that would ultimately dismantle the entire story Azim was about to tell just minutes later. Because while the silent footage recorded the truth, the man standing beside Lily's body was preparing to rewrite the events of that night entirely, according to a completely different version. A version that he would repeat again and again, to the paramedics, to the police, and later, to the jury itself. Immediately after the impact, Azim did not flee. He also did not call an ambulance from the scene. Instead, he placed Lily into the vehicle, moving her from the original point of impact to a different location. Only then did he call 999. And when the emergency call handler answered, the story he told made no mention whatsoever of his own recovery truck. Instead, he claimed that Lily had been struck by another vehicle, which had then left the scene. When police officers and paramedics arrived, Azim did not retreat from that account. He continued repeating it, with remarkable composure, for someone who had supposedly just witnessed his girlfriend in a life-threatening condition. He even pointed towards vehicles passing along the road, as though he were trying to help identify the culprit of the imaginary hit-and-run collision that he himself had created. This was the detail that caused investigators from West Midlands police to become suspicious almost immediately. Because the behavior of an innocent person, panicking in the aftermath of a genuine accident, is often very different from the behavior of someone attempting to create and maintain a false narrative from beginning to end. Throughout the previous 2 years, according to people who had witnessed the relationship, Azim had become accustomed to controlling the narrative, controlling the situation, and controlling Lily herself. Now, at the scene of a homicide, he was doing exactly the same thing, except that the person being controlled was no longer his former partner, but the entire police investigation, the paramedics, and eventually, a jury. But there was one thing that even the most sophisticated manipulation could not control: the physical evidence. West Midlands police did not take long to realize that something did not add up. Investigators began a meticulous and systematic inquiry, seizing all available CCTV footage from the area, examining in detail the 999 call made by Azim, conducting a thorough examination of the original scene, and accurately establishing the true point of impact. Each piece of evidence was fitted together like a jigsaw puzzle. And that picture bore no resemblance to the story Azim had told. There was no unidentified vehicle on the CCTV footage. There was no evidence of a hit-and-run collision at the location he described. The actual point of impact, the damage left on the lamppost, and the movements of Azim's own recovery truck all pointed in one direction only. The story about a fleeing vehicle was entirely inconsistent with every piece of physical evidence at the scene. And then, the CCTV footage recording the entire sequence of events, from the moment Lily exited the vehicle, to the moment she tried to run, and finally to the fatal impact, became the central piece of evidence in the entire case. The prosecution argued that those images left no room for ambiguity. They clearly showed that Azim had used his own recovery truck to pursue and strike Lily. not as the result of a random accident, but as part of a deliberate sequence of actions. For the police, this was the moment when the entire narrative created by Azim collapsed completely. But for Azim, the battle was not yet over. At trial, he would present a third version of what happened that night. This time, before a jury. Before the court, Mohammed Azim denied murder. The account he presented this time was entirely different from his previous two versions. According to Azim's evidence, there had been no argument between them that night. Lily, according to his account, was standing directly in front of the vehicle. He was merely attempting to drive around her, a routine maneuver to avoid her, with no intention of causing harm. The collision, he insisted, was entirely accidental, and afterwards, again according to his account, it was panic that led him to invent the story about a hit-and-run driver. Throughout the trial, Azim repeatedly used the same phrase before the jury. "I panicked." That was his explanation for every inconsistency. Why he moved the body, why he called 999 with a false account, and why he pointed towards innocent vehicles traveling along the road. But the prosecution did not accept that explanation. Their argument was simple, but powerful. A genuinely innocent person acting in panic would usually tell the truth at the first available opportunity, not create, maintain, and repeatedly reinforce a complex chain of lies over many hours to multiple people, from paramedics to police officers. According to the prosecution, that pattern of behavior did not reflect innocent panic. It reflected a clear awareness of the need to conceal a crime. This was the central issue of the entire trial. Would the jury accept the explanation of a tragic accident followed by a panicked reaction? Or would they accept the CCTV evidence, the forensic evidence, and a carefully constructed series of lies, all pointing in one direction only? After many days of argument, the jury would have to reach the final decision. Lily Whitehouse died at the age of 19, leaving behind a baby who had been born only a few months earlier. Her story is a painful reminder that controlling behavior, constant arguments, and power imbalances within a relationship should never be dismissed as just normal relationship problems. They are warning signs, and sometimes recognizing them early can make the difference between life and death. If, while watching this video, you recognize some familiar signs in your own relationship or in the relationship of someone you care about, do not keep it to yourself. Talk to someone you trust or reach out to domestic abuse support services in your local area. Sometimes, a single conversation can be enough to change the course of a life. And if you found this video meaningful, please leave a like, so the channel can continue bringing stories like this to a wider audience. Not to exploit tragedy, but to help more people recognize the warning signs before it is too late. Please share this video if you believe it could help someone, and do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so that you do not miss future cases that we will examine in careful detail, always with respect for the victims behind every story. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We will see you again in the next video.